Hello and welcome to another program with Pastor Frank Lewis. And I'm going to be talking to you today about something that has really come to my attention over the last year or 2 years, and that is how many narcissistically wounded people, children, that came from families that were raised by narcissistic mothers and narcissistic fathers have come across my path. And I'm finding in the work that I do, which is for helping people with emotional healing, that there's just a whole lot more of narcissists in either fathers or mothers or children that have been wounded, as now they're adults, have been wounded by narcissists. And so I thought today that I would go ahead and talk to you about what are the effects on children that are raised by a narcissistic mother and a narcissistic father. And I believe this is going to be very helpful to you because you may see yourself. I was raised by a narcissistic father, and so I have great experience with this. And some of the things I'm going to talk to you about when I get to the father part of this is about my experience. And this may be your experience. So I want you to pay particular attention to this video, because this video may answer some questions for you as to why you are in the position you're in, why you do what you do, and hopefully it'll open your eyes. Hosea 4:6 says, "My people perish for a lack of knowledge." And what we don't want is you perishing for not knowing what happened to you as a child if you were raised by a narcissistic mother, or what happened to you as a child if you were raised by a narcissistic father. And what we don't want is for you to continue, like what happened to me, that you continue with your children, raising them in ways that are going to cause them great problems with their emotional issues in the future because as they grow up, because that's going to just keep the cycle going. And I'm committed. That's one of the things that I'm absolutely committed to, and that's why I'm doing this whole thing, is I don't want to see this continue. I really don't want to see emotionally wounded mothers and fathers because of all the different things we've talked about already. But today we're going to talk about narcissistic wounding, and I don't want to see that continue with you raising your children in the way that you were raised. And but it's very difficult if you don't know what the truth is. So today I'm going to talk to you about the truth. But before I do, I want you to know about this book. This is the book that I wrote, called The Key. This is the key to emotional healing. And this key is extremely valuable to you because it's going to tell you a lot of what happened to you as a child, and it will help you to not continue putting on your children, projecting on your children what happened to you as a child. So get this book. You can get it at Amazon, and it's very, very important to have this because it's going to tell you not only what the problems are that happened to us as children, but what the solutions are. That's the key. So that'll be very important for you. You can get it on Amazon, and it'll really help you a lot. The other thing you can do is go to my YouTube channel at Fortifying Families 4, at Fortifying Families 4. Now, why is it that name? Because somebody else had the name Fortifying Families. And I have 21 videos for marriage and probably 6 or 7 videos for parents raising children. And today we're going to talk about narcissism and what that's all about. And you'll be able to get that in 2 weeks from today. And so it'll be hopefully a real eye-opener for you. One of the things we have to do is figure out, or really I need to tell you, what is narcissism? Well, narcissism comes from Greek mythology. Narcissus saw his image in a reflection in the water, and he fell in love with his image, and he couldn't turn away from it. And so he absolutely, that's where the term comes from. He fell in love with himself. And that's what narcissists do. But they don't do it in the ways that you would expect, because, see, they hide, because they're very, 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 very insecure. So we're going to also look at what psychologists say about narcissism. And psychology says that it's a personality pattern of self-focus, entitlement, and lack of empathy. That's one of the main things. A narcissist, my father, for instance, had lack of empathy. And my mother told me that he had very little empathy, and they didn't have a great marriage. You can't have a great marriage with a narcissist because he lacks empathy, he feels entitled, and it's all about him. It's all about him. If it's a man, it's all about her. If it's a woman, and it can be either one of them. But true narcissists, they become destructive to their children and to their wives or husbands when the traits of narcissism dominate their identity and their relationships. And that's really what happens. They dominate them. In other words, they have these traits. And I'm going to tell you about those traits in a minute. The core of a narcissist it's really a defense mechanism. Narcissism really is a defense mechanism to a very, very wounded person. And I think the reason why we're seeing more of this, and I'm going to talk to you about this last week, and that is because of the culture and because of society. It's actually causing more narcissism than we ever expected. But their grandiosity and their needs for control are really hiding insecurity and extreme woundedness. Extreme. They were really, really wounded. That's why they lack empathy. They never received any love. And so how can you have not received love and give love? Well, you can't do that. And they're extremely insecure. They're extremely insecure. They don't process pain like other people do. They hide from it. In other words, they don't accept pain. They don't accept what happened to them in childhood because it would expose them, and they can't stand to be exposed. And so they idealized an image that really was about admiration and control so that they would survive. That's really what they did. They idealized. They put a false self together. You know, they actually created a person that they thought would be a better person than the one they were, because they couldn't come to grips with the reality that they were as messed up as they were emotionally. So they created a different person. Their relationships with them are absolutely exhausting and one-sided. And I've heard that in my groups. I have groups that I do 5 days a week, and it's because of the great need for people to be able to have a safe place to talk about things. And it's part of the key, it's reparenting. And I did talk about that in prior programs, but the reality to it is that they don't want to take any responsibility. They don't want to be known. And so they end up avoiding vulnerability, and they end up trying to protect their fragile ego, trying to protect their self-image. And so they do it by being in control, and they do it by intimidation in many other ways that we're going to talk about. Now, I'm going to go through quickly some traits. I want you to get some traits of the narcissist because it'll help you to kind of see where maybe your father or mother was a narcissist, and it'll help. It'll help your understanding. So the traits that I want to talk about is they have an inflated self-image. They have an inflated self-image, and they need excessive admiration. In other words, they need their children to show them all the time that they're good and that they're give them attention. And so that's something that's not the job of children. It's a role reversal. I'm going to talk about that. They have a sense of entitlement. My father was very entitled. My father was a narcissist, and he was a doctor, and he was a rageaholic. So he was very, very angry. And so he had a sense of entitlement. He thought he was entitled to treat his children and his wife the way he did. They exploit others and use them without any kind of guilt or empathy. In other words, they just use people. They use their family. Like in my father's case, he didn't use people outside of the family, he just used his family. And didn't have any conscience about it, and it was really sad. They envy or compare. In other words, they think that they envy other people, or they think that other people envy them. That's kind of strange, but it's really how they operate. Like I said, they have a lack of empathy, so they do not feel what other people feel. They don't feel anything, really. They just have a lack of feelings. They have a fragile self-esteem, and they're very, very wounded, like I said. They're very wounded. That's why they're narcissists, is because they're very wounded. They had to create this false self. They are emotionally volatile, like my father. I mean, he'd go off in a moment. And so they just can't hold back. They get easily emotionally triggered, and they go to anger quite a lot. Or sometimes they'll shut down and try to cause their children to pity them and try to, do that. So, the reason I'm telling you those traits is so you have a better understanding of who narcissists are. But right now, I want to look at the effects that happen, that occur to children that are raised by narcissistic mothers. And then after that, we'll look at traits and also the effects of children raised by narcissistic fathers. Now, here's the key. On the outside, this is my father too, but on the outside, a narcissistic mother looks like they are self-confident, they're, high achievers maybe. They look like they kind of have it all together, but nothing could be further from the truth because behind closed doors, their children are, the children see everything differently. They are emotionally confused, they have guilt, and they're not seen. They're not seen by their mother. They're not listened to. They're not, it's not happening for children of narcissistic mothers. They do this not seen and control, as I said, to cover up and to protect their very, very fragile egos. They're very, very wounded, as I also said. The children are there in her mind to meet her needs. She's not there to meet their needs. It's total role reversal. And so that love is conditional, and she gives love when the kids do things in obedience, when her children are obedient, when they perform, and when they are doing instead of being. In other words, she wants them to go ahead and earn their love, earn her love. And so they believe love is earned and it's not freely given. And so that's not a way that you want children to be, but that is the way they are. As adults, they chase approval, and they chase the approval they really can't get. They never got it from their narcissistic mother. She was not nurturing. She was not loving. She was maybe very unkind. And so they constantly, as adults, are looking for approval, and they didn't get it, so they're looking for it. And this isn't about love for the narcissistic mother. It's about control. It's not about love. It's about control. Whereas a healthy mother, and that's the one we're shooting for, by the way, that's the one that I want you to be, is provides emotional safety, and the feelings of her children are very important to her. So she listens, and she hears her children, and she has empathy for her children, and she values, not controls her children. And so, not to say that there isn't some control, but it's not an over control. It's not a me versus you type of control. The narcissistic mother, the emotional focus is on herself. The emotional focus is all self. Remember the Greek mythology. It's all about self. Remember psychology, all about self. And remember, the devil was kicked out of heaven because it was he all about self. It wasn't, he thought that he could take on God. Whoops, he was mistaken. And so they're consumed by getting their emotional needs met by their children. They're consumed by it. That it's something they just absolutely use their children for, and they want attention, and they want emotional caretaking. They expect. Remember, I said they were entitled, so they expect to be cared for emotionally by their children. It's that, as I said, is role reversal. Children are not supposed to emotionally caretake their mothers in any way, shape, or form, or their fathers. But this is what mothers do that are narcissists, is they get their children to take care of them. This is what psychologists call the mother wound. This is a very big thing. Children that are raised by narcissistic mothers have a mother wound, and it really causes problems for the children, and because of their emotional neglect, and because they're manipulated. They're manipulated by the narcissistic mother. And so love is defined by performance, by a narcissistic mother. Love is defined by performance, and love is not freely given. As I said before, love is earned. It's a transaction. In other words, it's you do this, I'll do that. Quid pro quo. Quid pro quo says, if you'll do this, I'll do that. If you'll obey me, I'll give you love, or I'll give you attention. If they don't really give love, because they can't give love. They give attention. They give approval, but they don't give love, because my father couldn't love a post, and it wasn't his fault. It's the way he was raised. If you do what they want, they say they love. They say they love you, but they don't. They can't love, like I said. So that they're just saying it. If the children obey and they give her attention, then she rewards them with approval and acceptance. If her child disagrees with her or disappoints her or expresses needs, see, a child cannot express needs. Mother has all the needs, narcissistic mother, a child's narcissistic mother has all the needs. The child is not seen. their needs are not recognized. And so if a child talks about their needs, then the mother's going to have a problem. She's going to cause them punishment. She'll bring punishment. And so what happens is that this wires children for doing instead of being. In other words, you got to perform. Perform for attention. And so the whole thing is to adults, here's what I was looking at, was adults really need to, they just feel like they're never enough. They have to prove their value, their importance, and their worth. And, you know, what happens also with the narcissistic mothers, they sabotage identity. They so much control that the child doesn't have a chance to grow, and they don't, they diminish the child's, they diminish the child's feelings. They diminish the child's needs. And so they erode the sense of self. The child never knows who they are, and as adults, they're constantly looking for finding out who they are. And so that is going to be a serious problem. And so what we're going to look at now is what happens with a narcissistic father, because narcissistic fathers they look on the outside like my dad did. He was admired. He was a doctor. You know, everybody thought he, you know, he was a great guy. Well, at home, he wasn't a great guy. Every dinner was interrupted by my father getting mad, upset, or something like that. He was intimidating. He was, you know, he was volatile. He was very volatile. We would have a dinner, and he would interrupt the dinner by blowing up at my mother, my sister, and myself, then send me to my room and come down and yell at me. And so my home was not a safe place. My home was a minefield. It was a war zone. And he used his control to control me, and I got attention when I did what he wanted. When I didn't, I was punished, and I was punished severely. Approval was never consistent. It was conditional, and the love was performance-based. It wasn't love. I gotta stop using that word. It's really attention and approval. And so he got so angry that his voice, he controlled the entire environment of the home I was raised in. It was all about him. It was his voice. It was his opinion. He had to be right. He always had to be right. You could never argue with my dad. And so it just caused me to internalize some of my father's anger and some of my father's control. So I became an angry, controlling father to my kids. And my kids suffered, and it was really too bad. I became hypersensitive. I want you to get this. I became hypersensitive to my father and watching my father and trying to gauge whether he was going to be upset or not. And so I lived with anxiousness, with all authority. After I got out of the house, I had a real problem with authority. As a matter of fact, I hated authority because of the way my father treated me. I was never seen. I could never be the real self that I was. And I just it was a war zone. It was an absolute war zone. I internalized criticism, and children of narcissists do that. And so what happens is that I criticize myself. I couldn't live up. I couldn't live up to his expectation. And so when I made mistakes, I beat myself up. And he was arrogant to cover his insecurity, so I became arrogant to cover my insecurity. And so love was conditional, and I was emotionally isolated. I didn't know whether I was coming or going. I didn't know who I was. It was a very bad situation. My father had no empathy, as I said. As a boy, I learned that males dominate. Girls of narcissistic fathers they just can't trust men. My wife was raised by that, a narcissistic father, and she couldn't trust men, and she felt not safe most of the time. So the problem is that children like me fear their fathers. I didn't love my father. I feared him. I actually hated him at one time because of the way that he treated me. Now, as an adult, you either become a perfectionist or you rebel against your father's traits. Well, I rebelled against my father's traits, and I had a problem with authority, and so I ended up, just like I said, being controlling and angry. And with my kids, they suffered, and what happened to me may have happened to you. And so the reason why I have done this, gone through this today, is so that you could actually experience what it's like to be raised by a narcissistic mother, narcissistic father, so that you won't continue. I continued with my children, raising them like I was raised. I'm hoping and praying that you won't do that you'll take this information today and you will use it and learn from it, so that you won't make the mistakes that I made, and you will realize that the absolute key to life-changing for your children is you get emotionally healed. You must get emotionally healed. I have gotten emotionally healed. I can raise children now, but my children are older and I've got grandchildren, so I don't get that chance. But I can give that chance to you. I can give that opportunity to you to raise your children differently than you were raised. And that's what you want. You don't want to raise your children like you were raised, especially if you were raised by a narcissistic mother or a narcissistic father. You don't want that to happen. You want to raise your children to be emotionally healthy. You want them to be seen. You want to validate them. You want to hear them. You want to be there for them. You want to have empathy. You want all the things that we talked about when we talked about weeks ago, the ideal mother and the ideal father. And the reason you want that is because you have a responsibility given by God to raise emotionally healthy children. And with this information, I believe you can do just that. Raise emotionally healthy children.